Welcome to our webinar today, How to Focus on Your Customers to Grow Your Business by George Bureau of Straxius Consulting. My name is Ryan Kauth and I will be your host today. I direct the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, at UW Green Bay. The Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is part of a statewide network and national America's SBDC network, supporting entrepreneurs and business owners through no-cost confidential business advising and targeted educational programs. Regional SBDC experts facilitate improvement and growth for small and emerging mid-sized companies and help launch successful new enterprises. The no-cost business planning and low-cost workforce leadership development training at the Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA. Our website is right there on the screen. It's uwgb.edu/SBDC. Today we continue our 2015 monthly no-cost 30-minute topical webinars series designed for the success of small business owners and their executive team members. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will share the upcoming webinar topics, and we encourage you to consider registering for those. We thank Mickey Noon and Tim Bino from First Business Bank for their partnership in promoting these monthly webinars and for their dedication to small business success. We also thank Michael Wentworth and his company, TMR Associates, the B2B appointment setting company providing qualified leads and market insights. We thank him and TMR Associates for their partnership in developing these webinars. After the webinar, you will be emailed a link to a recording of this webinar. And during the webinar, you are invited to ask questions at any time. Please use the menu along the right side of your screen indicated here in the red circle. Type your question and hit enter, and as soon as I see it, I will make note of it for the presenter to address toward the end of our webinar. And now I'd like to turn it over to our expert presenter this month, George Bureau of Straxius Consulting. George?
Well, good afternoon, all, and I want to thank Ryan and the Small Business Development Center at UW Green Bay, as well as our partners. And today we're going to talk about how to focus on your customers to grow your business. And you'll see that this is a topic I'm very passionate about because I think it makes a very big difference in your business. From an agenda perspective, we're going to first start with the case for customer focus. Why is it important? We'll talk about really what is customer focus. How do you define those expectations? Moments of truth, how we assess where we are today, and most importantly, your role as a leader. So let's go ahead and get started. I think the first thing is, so what? Why should I care about customer focus? Well, there's a lot of data out there. The first slide here talks about customer loyalty and retention. The companies that have the highest levels of customer loyalty and retention truly have the highest profit and growth rates within their business segments, so they stand above their peers. Loyalty generates repeat sales, increased sales, and referrals, because again, your loyal customers become almost an adjunct sales force for you. There certainly is a connection between customer loyalty and employee loyalty, as well as between those and profitability. And you'll see when I talk customers and as we go into this presentation, how the importance of employees comes out. And obviously related to that, 40% of the companies in the top 100 Fortune, America's best companies to work for, also appear on the Fortune 500 list. So there's a direct link between that. Now on the negative side, and I think we've all seen this being a consumer and being an active consumer, 90% of customers never complain about poor service or product. The scary part is, for all of us, they don't complain, they just go away. And the reason they go away often is because they perceive an attitude of indifference, that we truly don't care, or they don't matter as an individual customer. Now what can happen, is where it can really get dangerous, is they often tell, many times exaggerate, just like that proverbial fish story, at least 9 other people. So just think about what one customer can do. Go ahead, Ryan. So let's define customer focus, at least for this presentation. First of all, it's all around meeting or exceeding customer expectations in all aspects of every transaction with your company. Now we're going to slice and dice this so you can see what I mean. Let's talk about the first part. But before we do, customer focus, it's really an ongoing process. It truly becomes a fabric of how you do business. And I want to contrast that with customer focus being a program. For it to work, it's integrated into everyone's roles, from leadership through the entire organization. It's not owned by customer service. It applies to external and internal customers equally. In fact, I can make the claim that internal customers are actually more important, at least to get it started. So it's not just external customers. And customer focus is not about standing still. It means measurement, benchmarking, and improvement. Contrast that with truly setting standards and that's moving on autopilot. So let's go ahead. Customer expectations really means asking questions. Most importantly, we've all heard about active listening, but listening naively, actively, hearing them out. Just the fact that we ask and listen shows we care, and you'll be surprised what we'll learn. Part of that is getting at those little things, because the little things can be either an irritant or can set your company apart in a very big way. So let's go ahead and spin. Now, meeting or exceeding. We decide whether we're meeting or exceeding. No, not really. It's the customer who decides whether we're meeting or exceeding. So with that, it's important to have an outside-in view to measure from the customer's perspective. Now, if you fall short, develop a plan to get better and commit to it. If we meet, realize we need to improve. And if you're exceeding, and what exceeding is, how do we stay there, recognizing that if we stand still, eventually we will fall behind. Now, during this presentation, you'll see a number of blue boxes. These are some questions I want to leave you with when you go back to work. Ask yourself, do you know if you're meeting or exceeding your customer expectations? If so, how do you know? Do you really know? So let's go ahead. Now, all aspects really means every customer contact represents a chance to make an impression. So what do I mean by that? We often think it's customer service or just the product and how it comes in. But think about the various ways that your organization touches your customer. Anywhere from being a prospect to a trade show to a customer service person on the phone to the billing they receive. All those different touch points are very important. Your truck drivers, for example, if you make a product, who deliver the product, they may not work for you or be paid by you directly, but to the customer, they represent you. The next piece, every transaction, like Toby Keith says, I can be good as I once was, but I'm not, it really comes back to consistency day to day, order to order. It's okay to be great, but how are you doing it consistently? Because again, you set an expectation with customers. So as I mentioned here in the blue box on the bottom, how consistently are you meeting or exceeding your customer needs? And again, think about that. It means measurement, and it means understanding what those needs are. Now the next thing, moments of truth. I think it's important to recognize no matter what business we're in, no matter how much planning we do, and we all see it, things will go wrong. What's most important is to have a recovery strategy. Now, a recovery strategy is important. Why? Think about this. It truly costs 5 times more on average, if you look across American business, to get a new customer than to retain one. So there's a lot of money riding on maintaining customers and growing business with them. But when things go wrong, do we have a recovery strategy? When things can go very wrong, what it often means, if you solve the problem and make it right, 70% will do business with you again. And what's really, really cool is 90% plus will do business with you again if the problem is immediately resolved. So when I talk about moments of truth, think about yourself as a consumer. Think about when something has gone wrong, whether it be checking into a hotel, picking up a rental car, a myriad of ways. I'm sure you can recall a situation where a person was empowered, they knew what needed to be done, they acknowledged the problem, they fixed it, they made it right, and they went above and beyond. Think about how many people you likely have told. So not only does it become a very satisfied customer who buys again, they become an ambassador for you. So that's why I have that blue box at the bottom. What is the last story that your company created? This is truly making lemonade out of lemons. Now, assessing customer focus. I'll start on the left side, but I want to spend some more time on the right. From an external customer, it really means defining their needs and how are they measured. A good question that will come up is, this is where we get into some granular detail. You know, for example, when you ship orders, what % of your orders that go out day to day are shipped on time and 100% accurately? And does the paperwork match, for example, or are there potential errors in the paperwork? So again, that's an example of a touch point with a customer. Understand how satisfied your customers are for each of the touch points. Will they buy again? And decide, this very strategic around this third bullet, where do you want to position your organization to win in the marketplace? Because again, if you play in a marketplace, for example, where there are other competitors who make a similar product or offer a similar service, customer focus can truly be a differentiator that sets yourself apart. And if I look at this strategically, customer focus extends your people into the marketplace. And often it's the team, it's your culture that is the most difficult to duplicate and the hardest for competition to try to work around. Which leads into the right side of the equation here. Assessing customer focus, again, I would make the case that it really starts with the internal customers. Do they know what the customer expectations are, both internal and external? And let me tell you a quick example of a story of a culture I was involved in, where we asked an employee what their role was, and they saw no connection to the customer. They worked in the IT department. Well, it turns out the system, which again was a series of acronyms, we asked who used the system. Well, it turned out customer service used the system. It was a backbone for order status and order entry. And so when you ask this particular employee regarding what happens if the system corrupted on a Friday afternoon at 3, well, we wouldn't be able to enter orders nor be able to check status. And there's again an example where a light went off to say, I understand that the customers want a system that's up 100% of the time or 99.9, and they want answers that are accurate and very timely. And for me to do that, my system has to be working. Now, next to that one is, do the internal customers have the support, tools, and training to do their job? From a support perspective, you may not work for the customer directly, but you certainly support and work along someone who does, which means your contact people on the front lines are often only as good as the team that surrounds them and supports them. And so if they can't get answers, if they don't have accurate information, or if they're not potentially empowered at times, that's a challenge. The tools, getting the information, responsive systems, and training. So again, do you have the support, tools, and training to do their job? Working together, again, internal customers that know their roles, customer expectations, can truly deliver customer focus to the external customers. So Ryan, next slide. Let's talk about your role as leaders. I'm going to talk through 6 areas. And again, from the perspective, if you started tomorrow, so how do I get started with this? And I'll be the first one to tell you, you're talking about a cultural change, and we're talking here about changing behaviors and expectations of people. This is not a 3-month, 6-week process. This is a 6-month, 18-month, 3-year type of process, depending on your culture. But it truly starts with making the case for customer focus, just like I did at the start of this presentation. Then it means setting the expectation, creating the climate, measuring progress and sharing those results, both the good, bad, and ugly, celebrating customer focus wins, and lastly, improving. So all those working together. So let's go ahead and talk about the first one. Now, the case for customer focus, Now, from an organization perspective, it means happy, loyal customers. It means sustained advantage, which again, as we look in the very complex competitive marketplaces that we play in, sustained advantage is difficult to come by. Like that is not easily copied. Think about since we have the privilege of living in Northeast Wisconsin, look at the culture of the Green Bay Packers, how difficult that would be to copy because, again, it permeates everything that we do. Obviously, if you do these things, your organization wins. Now, from an employee perspective, what does it mean? You know, all those other words sound really nice at a corporate level. It means enhanced job security ultimately. It means more satisfying work. What do I mean by that? It means they can make a decision. And let me give you an example. When I ran a consumer products company, we went through customer focus, cultural change. We had a person working on a loading dock, you know, making $12, $13 an hour, who had been there for 2 years. Not someone you would think necessarily to say, do they really understand customer focus? We had a truck arrive that was to be loaded with consumer products goods. In this case, we're going into a particular retailer that sold baby-related products. The truck still had smell of meat products in it. That person knew to stop loading the truck and to turn the truck away because they were empowered. And believe me, they were very proud, and we were very supportive of what they did. Obviously, also with this, to an employee perspective, it means they work for a winner. So again, it allows them to make a difference, to have pride in what they do, and with all this working together, it enhances job security. So that means make the case. Now, the next part is setting the expectation. Now, if you read a number of books on leadership, for example, Good to Great, one of my favorites, it's very important when you talk about customer focus that it has to begin with your leadership team. They must be on board for this to work. When I say on board, it's not passive support, it's active support. And it's also holding people accountable. There are times with this process where you have to make difficult decisions. But it's important that the leadership team be on board and that this message, this change, ultimately of culture in how you run your business, starts to cascade through the organization from you and then from your leadership team outwards into the organization. And recognizing, again, you can only be as good as your weakest link. Now, the customer-focused metrics that we talked about, they're important to start to build into your performance management system. And let me give you an example here. For example, a company I work for had a metric called detrimental order changes. And these were dates that customers requested product to be on their floor because they were running just in time. However, our organization made changes to when those orders shipped based upon what was easier to run in operations. In this case, we built a metric into performance management system, and we changed detrimental order changes into broken service promises. And lo and behold, within 6 weeks, those broken service promises dropped by over 30%. So very, very powerful stuff. Next slide. Now we could do scorecards, we could do metrics. Please do not underestimate this slide. This is one of the most powerful slides of the whole deck. Seek stories. Once you start to roll out customer focus and talk about it, one of the ways to truly drive cultural change, but more importantly, get people excited and engaged, is at staff meetings, let your staff know you're going to ask for a customer-focused story from each of your leaders. And this can be the form of someone who's gone above and beyond, who has started to exemplify where you want to take your organization as it relates to customer focus. Now, as you go around, let's say a meeting room of 6 people, you don't want to be the leader there. You don't want to be the person sitting there that John doesn't have a story. Because what happens, the next staff meeting you ask the same thing, they will have a story. And what's very interesting about this is your leaders will start to look for stories. And by looking for stories, they start to empower the organization. They start to help naturally start to slowly over time change the organization by empowering people to helping drive behavioral change. Now, the slide next to it is one really for you personally, or excuse me, the block next to it, which is walk the talk. And please, as leaders, we often forget that we're being watched. And whether you're a parent with 1 to 3 children at home, or whether you're a vice president with a staff, you truly lead by example. Look for teachable moments. Look for moments where in the past you might have done something differently. But share those with your leaders, with the employees, of how customer focus has impacted and truly changed how you make your decisions. And share that very openly with them. And it could, for example, be where you had a product that was made to ship and it was made close to spec. Traditionally, you might have just tried to get away with it and ship it as a company. But in this case, you may say, no, it did not meet specification. We're going to minimally talk to the customer. We're going to be open and upfront about it and transparent. And again, people start looking for these stories because it truly means that you believe and you're walking the talk. Next slide. Measuring progress, sharing results. Obviously, it's very important for each customer contact to start to measure what are those expectations of your external customer, what are the expectations for your internal customer. So, for example, if you're sitting in a scheduling area, how quickly do you respond to requests? How fast do you pick up a telephone, which could tie into your telephony metrics? How do you measure? Again, expectations, translate those measurements, recognize not everything it can be a number one priority, prioritize, and most importantly, have a plan to improve. And that could be tactical type improvement, or it could be strategic improvement to recognize maybe you need a new phone system in a certain area to get there. But examples are shown over the right, again, where you can develop metrics of how fast you respond, how friendly or courteous are your people. Can you do one-stop shopping, or does it, for example, does a customer or an inquiry to come in have to be transferred 5 times to get an answer? And we all know, calling in from the outside, how difficult it is. In fact, think about today how difficult it is just to get a live person on a telephone. Being proactive to their needs, being consistent. So again, these are examples of measuring progress. It's important to share those results, again, so people know that they're important, but also know where we're making progress, but also where we need to make progress. It's okay to have areas that are behind, but have a commitment to get better. Next slide. Celebrate customer focus wins. This is an example that can be a change for some leaders, and that is, rather than catching people doing something wrong, catch people doing things right, where they started to change behavior around customer focus. If you do, talk it up, make a positive example out of them. Have spontaneous fun awards. Make the connection between what they did and an award. It doesn't have to be big dollars, but it has to be fun. It gives people shine. People love to see themselves put up, sometimes in the limelight, for going above and beyond. Now with that, and in parallel, you can institute a recognition process, and the recognition process ultimately should become peer-driven. Why? Because their peers know this is what we know what needs to get done. We don't need to go to leaders and managers to ask them all the time. But if you have a recognition process that supports it, it can be very powerful. And particularly for strategic wins, where you've set a benchmark for yourself, for example, to improve your product quality or improve your on-time service performance. It takes multiple people and departments and a lot of hard work and labor. Celebrate those wins. When you get to a key performance milestone, make a big deal out of it, because again, it shows people that we care, and it also shows them what's important. So with that, I want to leave you with a question on this slide, is what is the last customer focused win that your team celebrated? Think about how recent that was, and think about what you could do. Next slide. Commit to continuous improvement. Again, coming back to the power that you have as a leader and the impact you can make, is really just asking the question, how are we doing in becoming customer focused? It's amazing the answers you will get. Now, part of that is when we ask them, how can I help you? It's very fine to also ask, what do you recommend for a solution? People often know what needs to be done. We need to give them more credit as long as we ask them. If they need help, it's important we follow up. And again, the simple questions of how are we doing, how can I help you, these questions demonstrate that we care. It also demonstrates that we're committed to solving problems. Now, part of this I want to recommend to you, particularly early in the process, is look for low-hanging fruit, because that helps you build momentum and start out strong. No different than the quarterback who comes out with the first 5 or 10 plays that are already laid out. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to, Ryan, open for questions. We have a few moments and see what might have come up.
George, thank you very much for sharing this information. It's really valuable. The questions that we often get on these webinars are how do you start, which you've covered very well. You also covered a couple of ideas for metrics, the discrepancies in orders, how many, I think you said how many times, the phone rings before you answered it. Are there any others that you've had experience with that might be really, really simple, or maybe some that are just really ingenious that you have the information already, or your frontline people have the information already that you can, you can easily implement?
Well, and I'm gonna bring up two, and one, believe it or not, is not as easily put into metrics, and I'm going to call them coffee stains. And I'm going to use an example that was found by Southwest Airlines, where they found a direct link between, if you think about the flip down tray that's in your seat on an airplane, and when they saw stains that were on there, let's say the circles that a soda can leaves or a coffee cup, they found that the customers saw that the plane obviously wasn't being cleaned, and therefore there might have been issues regarding how the engine was maintained. Now, that makes no rational sense. It's a totally different group of people. However, from the customer, it does make sense. So one thing I certainly suggest, one of the ways to get started in asking your employees is, where are there some coffee stains? Long ago, I was in the paper industry, and you could imagine for a very high-priced product that was made, let's say per roll, I'll never forget opening up a product at a customer site, and right in the middle of the packaging was a nice, big, greasy footprint from someone's shoe. Now, I guarantee you, just like a very clean car runs better, in this case, we had to explain. We started out in the kind of in a hole. So that's one area, which is coffee stains. The other area, Ryan, coming back to metrics, it comes back to it, certainly from a service perspective, and that is, how accurate are we? Because again, all this is consumers. There's nothing worse when we order, we get the wrong product, or the paperwork doesn't match. And those are things that are metrics that are very, very handy to your accounts receivable people, the accounts payable people, within your customer service, any customer contact person. Another one is going to be how quickly a telephone is answered when someone calls in, or how fast emails are responded to. So those are very simple metrics to start to understand where you are, certainly from being responsive.
Thank you, George. And I know you also mentioned, simply asking the question, how can I help you, and continuing to do that so that your employees do the same, and then also asking each person in a meeting all the time, every meeting, sharing a customer-focused story. So, George, thank you again. We don't have any more time for questions. If you're still on the call here on the webinar, please contact George. His contact information is right there on the screen, and he can help you further. So, George, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks all.
Our webinar next month features George Garrett of Future Focus Group, and he will present Secrets to Successful and Simple Employee Development. In September, Tony Bush of Priora Cash Flow Management will present how to manage your banking relationship and not be managed by it. Then in October, how your workflow improves your bottom line. In November, how to harvest maximum value from your business. And in December, how to use benchmarking to increase your business value. You can register for our on-site workshops, our virtual certificate programs, and all upcoming no-cost webinars at uwgb.edu/SBDC. We also have several past webinar recordings there on sales, marketing, business ownership, and leadership. In closing, I would very much like to thank George Bureau of Straxius Consulting. George, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ryan.
Mickey and Tim at First Business Bank, and Michael Wentworth of TMR Associates. And thank you all for attending. Now, go focus on your customers to grow your business. This concludes our webinar. Goodbye.